I'm gonna make sure I get like the meat just is falling apart. The difference with an Instant Pot compared to a pressure cooker, I find that the meat, yes, it'll be nice and tender, but all the flavors sucked out of it. The Instant Pot cooks it fast and under pressure, and the meat turns out tender. I broke that apart with a spoon. Delicious. Hello, everyone. As I like to say, you've seen how it tastes. Now let's see how we make it. I'm looking forward to this supper tonight. It's beef stew done in the Instant Pot. So what I have here is 3 potatoes. Actually, there's 5 because mine were very small. They were just a little teeny new potatoes. So what I did was I cut them in half. I know the recipe says to chunk them, but the thing is, this is going to cook for 30 minutes, and potatoes don't take that long to cook. So I cut them in chunks about this size. That way, they're not going to turn to mush by the time the recipe's done. I've got 4 carrots that are in large chunks, and then 2 celery stalks. So those are all the veggies for it. Well, let's not forget about these. These are actually veggies, but they're the ones that we're going to fry up separately. So I have an onion that's chopped up here, along with 3 cloves of garlic that I minced. I have 2 pounds of beef that's cubed, so beef stew meat. And then I'm using beef broth with red wine. Now the recipe that I'm using came from ChatGPT. So we're going to test to see how good ChatGPT is at recipes. It does call for 1 cup of red wine. A bottle of dealcoholized wine is like $11 in the grocery store. I've got beef broth with red wine. So what I'm going to do is just add an additional cup of beef broth rather than using red wine. If you want to use red wine, if you happen to have some in the house, then by all means follow the recipe. For seasonings, we're using thyme and a couple bay leaves. So there's a teaspoon of thyme there. And then it says to season to taste with salt and pepper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to season the meat before I fry it. Now, they don't call for that in the recipe, but I like to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my Instant Pot on Saute mode. So if you have the Luxe Mini, you would just put it to Saute mode, and then I'm going to press start here and get that saute going. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in there, and while that's heating up, what I'm going to do is pour a little bit of oil into the meat, and then I'm going to sprinkle some pepper on it. About a teaspoon. And then I'm going to put about a teaspoon of salt in there too. So I like to season the meat when I fry it. And all you want to do is you want to just get this to brown. You want it to brown in the Instant Pot. So you're going to cook it for about 3 or 4 minutes. You might have to do it in 2 batches. Now, if you are using like something like a Luxe Mini, a 3-quart model, I'd suggest that you cut the recipe in half. It's very important. You'll see inside the Instant Pot that there's a fill line that says max. You don't want any of the ingredients to go beyond that point. So I forgot to press the start button on there. There we go. So we're seasoning this up. So what I'm going to do, as I mentioned, is I'm going to brown these in the Instant Pot. And what I'll do is I'll come back and I'll show you what they look like once they're browned. Okay, I just want to show you inside the Instant Pot as it's heating up. As you notice, I still have some beef left, so don't overcrowd it. Make sure that there's none on top of each other. And again, you just want to brown these. You don't want to cook them. So only for about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, folks, so the first batch has been browning there for a few minutes. I'll just show you what they look like. So you can see everything no more pink. Oh, sorry for the little wiggle there on the camera. Bring these out. You want to leave that juice in the pot. That's going to add flavor. And don't worry if it gets hardened because we're going to deglaze it. Now I'm putting the rest of the beef in, and we'll be back with the next step. Okay, folks, the second batch of beef is done. So we're going to take that out. It's nice and brown on the bottom of the pan. I'll show you. That brown on the bottom of the pan is flavor bites. So the next thing we're going to do is show you what it looks like. And then I'm going to put the onions and garlic in. So you see that brown bits? Don't worry about it because that's going to deglaze. We're going to put the onions and garlic in, and we're going to cook that for a couple minutes just till they start to turn translucent. Oh, I left a piece of beef in there. So we're going to let that cook, and then we'll bring you back for the next step. Okay, folks, the next step is we're going to deglaze the bottom with 1 cup. It says red wine. Again, I'm using beef broth with red wine. And it's important as you do this, you want to make sure that you scrape all of those brown bits that you saw on the bottom. You want to make sure that those are all scraped off, because if there's any left there, you're going to get a burn error. So just make sure as you're deglazing, part of it is making sure that you get rid of all of the crusty parts that were on the bottom. And that's going to add all the flavor. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, now that we have it deglazed, what we're going to do is we're going to add the beef in. Leave all the juices. You want all those juices going back in as well. Then we're going to put the vegetables in. Again, that's celery, carrots, potatoes. Wow, that's filling up the pot good. Stir that around. And again, make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom. Make sure everything's mixed up good. I'll give you a look at what it looks like. Look at that, folks. Now we're going to put the beef broth in. 4 cups. So this is 4 cups right here. We're going to pour that in and make sure it covers everything. And you don't want to be over the max line. And we have lots of room. Again, mix that in. Look at that. It also calls for 2 tablespoons or 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, which I'm going to add now, right here. I'm not a big fan of tomato paste, but that little bit shouldn't really impact the flavors that much. And we want to put the spices in. So 2 bay leaves and 1 teaspoon of thyme, or you may pronounce it thyme. Thyme is thyme. So we're going to put that in. Now, it doesn't call for it in the recipe, but whenever I'm cooking anything with a lot of meats and stuff in it, I like to heat it up a little bit. So we put some cold beef broth in there. So I'm going to leave that on saute just for a few minutes. If you have a meat thermometer, you can just put your meat thermometer into the liquid. And when it's getting close to boiling, so I would say about 190 degrees, then I would shut the saute function off and then close the lid. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it heat up for about 5 minutes just to give it a start. And then we'll be right back and I'll show you the next steps. So while that's heating up, you may be thinking, well, that looks a little bit runny. I like a thick stew. When you're cooking it in the Instant Pot, especially the pressure cooking part, you don't want the liquid to be thick, because if it's thick, you could get the burn error, and that's something, trust me, you don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thicken it up after, and it does call for that in the recipe, that if you like your stew thick. Now it's saying to use a flour and water slurry. You can use a cornstarch and water slurry. I like to use butter. Put a couple tablespoons of butter with a couple that is melted with a couple tablespoons of flour. Just adds more flavor to the stew. So stay tuned and we'll be ready with the next steps. Okay, folks, it's been about 5 minutes. I pressed the cancel button, and that applies to the Lux Mini as well. Now what we're going to want to do is put the lid on. It goes on the same way on all models. Now this model here has a sealing mode. It seals automatically as soon as you close it. If you have a Lux Mini or an older brand, you should see a knob here that says sealing or venting. You want to make sure that that's on sealing mode or seal mode. And then you're going to want to move this up to, or I'm going to move this up to pressure cook, and I'll let you know in a minute what you do if you have the other model. And we're going to set it to 30 minutes. Now, if you have a Lux Mini, what you'll want to do is hit the pressure cook button, and then you should see a plus minus here. And what you'll want to do is hit the plus minus after it's sealed till it gets to 30 minutes, either direction. And then it'll start automatically. Mine, I actually have to hit the start button. So I'm going to hit that, then hit the start button for 30 minutes, and then we're going to let it pressure cook. So once it's done, you should hear the timer go off, and then it'll start counting backwards. So what we're going to want to do is let it naturally release. This has to come up to pressure. So what we're going to do is let it come up to pressure, then you should hear a beep, and then if you look at your Instant Pot, it should say 30 minutes on it. For now, it'll just say on. Once it comes to pressure, it'll show you the time, and then you know that it's set. Just leave it, wait for it to finish the 30 minutes, and then set a timer on your own for 15 minutes. Once the 15 minutes is up, I'll show you what the next steps are. Stay tuned. We're going to let this come to pressure. Okay, folks, I just want to show you. So when it comes to pressure, you'll see the time that you set for it. That will start counting backwards. So in another minute, it'll say 29 and so on until it gets to 0. Then it's going to go off. Then it's going to start counting again, but in the other direction. And that's where you're going to want to leave it for 15 minutes. So I'll bring you back once it's finished the pressure cook, and then it's finished the 15 minutes natural release. Stay tuned. Okay, folks, so it's finished the pressure cook part. So remember, once you started the pressure cook, it just says on. Then it'll display the time once it comes to pressure and start counting backwards till it's done. Once it's done, it'll start counting the other way now. So it'll start going forward. So you'll see 0 when it's done, the 30 minutes. Then you should start seeing it counting to 1, 2, 3, and so on until it gets to 15 minutes. So when I say set a timer on your own for the 15 minutes, that's just so you don't have to sit there hovering over the Instant Pot, because it's not going to beep after the 15 minutes is up. So again, it's going to start counting the other way and start going forwards instead of going backwards. I'm going to keep talking and see if we can see that change to 4 minutes, just so you can know what I'm talking about. There we go. So again, set a timer on your own so you don't have to sit here waiting and waiting or keep looking at it. I'll be back once that comes up to 15. Okay, folks, this is just about to hit the 15-minute mark. What I've done is I've prepared a slurry here with 2 tablespoons of butter, heaping, and 2 tablespoons of flour. And I've got a nice little rubbery mixture here that I'm going to use to scoop it out to make sure that we get it all in. So now that it's come to the 15 minutes natural release, we're going to hit cancel. This applies to both models. And then on my model, on this one, I just have to press this button. You want to make sure that your Instant Pot is not underneath a cupboard or anything like that. You want to make sure that it's out in the open because steam is going to come out of that knob. So I've got it away from everything. You can also put, if you want, a cloth on it if you're concerned, over top. But I find that just splatters the steam everywhere. So I just let it go up into the open air. On mine, I just have to press this button right here, and then it's going to release. Now, if you have one of the Lux models or the one with the valve on it, what you're going to want to use like a fork or something to go away from it so you don't burn yourself, and then slide the knob over to venting, and that will release the pressure. So we're going to let that pressure release, and then we'll be back with the next step. Okay, folks, so the pressure is finished releasing. You know that it's fully released when the pin drops on top. So you'll notice that there's a little pin right here. Once that drops, so it won't let you open it until that pin drops. So that's a safety feature. You're going to see this at the same time that I am. Now, there's going to be steam coming out. So I'll hold the camera back. And look at what we have there, folks. There's the stew. Now, of course, it's not thickened yet. But look at that. So let's take the bay leaves out. So I'll go fishing around for the other one. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to switch this to Saute. Now, if you have the Lux model, you'll just hit the Saute button and then set the time for it and just let it go. Once you hit the button, it'll start up automatically. Mine, I have to actually press the start to turn it on. And we want that to heat up. It's already going to be hot. I'm going to fish that bay leaf out, and then we're going to start making the thickening that up a bit. Guess what, folks? I can't find the bay leaf. Oh, well, that's all right. Now, you remember what I said about the potatoes? These are all going to break apart anyway. If you would have cut them up into chunks, they would have just disintegrated. And you can see that heating up. I'm going to thicken that up, and I'll be right back to show you what it looks like once we've done that. Look at this, folks. Look at that. Nice and thickened up. And now I think what I'm going to do, because that's going to take too long and I am hungry, I'm going to dip some of this out into that bowl and let it cool off before we eat it. There's what we're dealing with, folks. Doesn't that look good? It smells amazing. So we're going to let that cool off, and we'll be right back to eat it. And we'll see how it tastes. Is it good? Okay, folks. Now's the test. Let's see how it tastes. Look at that. I don't want it to leak out, but can you see that? It's still very hot, but I'm hungry. I'm going to make sure I get the meat just is falling apart. The difference with an Instant Pot compared to a pressure cooker, I find that the meat, yes, it'll be nice and tender, but all the flavors sucked out of it. The Instant Pot cooks it fast and under pressure, and the meat turns out tender. I broke that apart with a spoon. Delicious. The meat just falls apart. Vegetables, because of potato, remember I put them in pretty much whole I just cut them in half. They're easy to cut up with your spoon or fork, whatever you use. Delicious. Very good, easy, quick, instant pot. Now, if you were doing that in the slow cooker, what's it going to be? 4 hours on high. And then again, your meat will fall apart. But you're going to find that when you do it in the Instant Pot under pressure, you're locking in all those flavors. And the meat just turns out so much better. It's not like mush. So please try it out. It's a good recipe. And if you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. I'll be doing lots of recipes. I plan on doing one coming up on Popeyes. I asked ChatGPT to give me a copycat recipe for Popeyes, Louisiana, red rice and beans. So that's coming up tomorrow. Stay tuned and thanks for watching. Jamie, signing off.